Welcome everybody. In today's video, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, dividing decimals, and how to do it by hand. Now, we've already seen this a little bit, so I did introduce this concept when we were changing over from fractions to decimals, right? So recall that we did some of this. Sorry, my camera is being really bad today. We did some of this already when changing from a fraction to a decimal. So I'm just going to do a quick example here. So let's say you have the fraction 16/5. So I have an improper fraction, which is fine, but I can still use the same concept where mixed numbers and proper fractions. And this was the same thing as 16 divided by 5. So that 5 goes on the outside of your division bar and 16 goes on the inside. Now, 5 does not go into 1, but it does go into 16 3 times, which is 15. And I subtract and get 1. And now the problem doesn't finish. So instead of using a fraction here and writing my answer as 3 1/5, I'm going to keep going and write it as the decimal. So what we did is we added our decimal place in here to the 16 after the whole number. Because remember, there is a decimal point. It's just we don't usually write it in. And then I can always attach as many zeros as I need to finish the problem. So if I attach 1 0 and I bring that down, 5 goes into 10 2 times. This decimal point just goes straight up. So it's really important to stay lined up here. And then 2 times 5 is 10. And I end up being finished here. So my answer is just 3.2 or 3 2/10 in this case. So we have seen dividing a little bit with fractions, right? But we've kind of started with the more basics, a whole number divided by a whole number when we have a decimal answer. So now we're going to actually start bringing in decimals to start the division. Okay, so I'm going to start first with just doing some examples on dividing a decimal by a whole number. Okay, so and let me move this up for you guys to see. And you're going to see that's very similar to what we did above. We're just going to kind of keep going, bring that decimal point straight up, and attach zeros if we need to. So let's do some examples. So we're taking this number, we're dividing it by the whole number 7. So that 7 goes outside my division bar, and the 270.2 goes inside. Now, the biggest thing with dividing in general and dividing particularly with decimals is to make sure you stay lined up. That is so important. So you'll notice that I tend to put in extra zeros as I'm dividing just to make sure I don't miss anything. So I'm going to start here. 7 does not go into 2. So above it, I'm just going to put a little 0 to remind myself that I'm above the 2 here. 7 does go into 27. And it goes in 3 times, which is 21. Notice that I'm right above the 7. Now I'm bringing down the 0. So now I'm looking at the 7 go into 60, and it goes in 8 times, which is 56. And if I subtract here, I get 4. And I go ahead and I bring down that 2. Now, for my next value, 7 goes into 42 6 times. That 6 goes right above that 2. And then what happens is this decimal point comes straight up in the example. So my final answer here is going to be 38 6/10. I don't need the leading 0. If it's a 0 before a whole number, we can drop it. I'm really just using it to stay organized, because what happens is if you don't line up, then when you bring up your decimal point, it's going to be in the wrong spot. You're not going to have your numbers in the right above the right place value. So it's really important to stay organized here. If you need to use graph paper to kind of write in all the boxes, you can do that. If you need to make little vertical lines, so just something to keep yourself organized, then do that. But you really want to take your time here, or else you'll get a wrong answer. Now, we can check our work by multiplying, and I kind of skipped in the last videos, but you can also check your adding and subtracting work by doing the opposite. So you can check your addition work by subtracting, and you can check your subtraction work by addition. So we can check our division by multiplication, just like we did with whole numbers before. So for instance, here I take my answer, I multiply it by that 7, I count over my decimal places, so I have 1 decimal place here and then none here, so I have 1 altogether. And I see that I do get back to that original number of 270 and 2/10. Okay, so we can check our answers here by multiplying them back out. Let's do another example. -5 and 98/100 divided by 115. So that 115 goes on the outside. Now I'm not going to worry about the negative. I'm just going to put the 5.98 on the inside, and just remember that your answer is going to be negative, right? So negative divided by positive will stay negative. Now I'm going to start. 115 does definitely not go into 5, so I'm going to put a 0 above it. It also does not go into 59. So as I'm going through here, I do want to be careful. Keep in mind that we're kind of ignoring the decimal as we divide, except for to bring it up top. So I'm just kind of treating this as 59, not 5.9 now when I'm dividing. Sorry, I was plugging in my computer. So that decimal point is really just to bring up in the problem. All right, so let me just settle 1 second. Just had to plug in my computer. All right, so it doesn't go into 59, so I am going to put a 0 above that 9, again, just to keep myself organized here. And that decimal point comes straight up. Now, 115 does go into 598. I'm going to guess it's 5 times. That seems reasonable, but I'm going to just multiply it off on the side and just make sure. So 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 2 is 7. And 5 times 1 is 5. So if I multiply off to the side, I do see it's very close and it's not too big. So it looks like 5 is the correct answer here. If I try to do 6, I'm going to be way over 600. So that would be too big. So I subtract. 8 minus 5 is 3, and 9 minus 7 is 2. I don't have to worry about the 5 minus 5, and I don't worry about the decimal point at all. Once I bring it up, that decimal point is basically done. So I'm going to now keep going. I still have more numbers here, and I'm not really ready to round yet. My problem doesn't say to round, so I'm going to assume that it's going to end at some point, or I'm going to see a pattern. So I'm going to attach a 0, and I'm going to bring that down. Remember, you can always attach as many zeros as you need when dividing. We saw that when we were doing transferring between fractions and decimals. So now I do 115 into 230. So 100 into 200 seems to be 2, so I'm going to guess 2 here, but I'm going to multiply off to the side. And I see I get 230 exactly. So this will now finish the problem. So my answer is negative 52 thousandths.